Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Roberge. I'm a first semester master's candidate in maritime archaeology here at Flinders, and today I will be presenting on some of the submerged Neolithic sites off of the Carmel coast in Israel, based mostly off of the Galili and Rosen seminar reading we were assigned, but I'll also be using a few other sources. And I have also included a slide with my contact information for questions and comments, and just to get to know each other before I join everybody in Adelaide. I'm currently taking this topic from New York, so I'll begin my presentation with a land acknowledgement for Flinders as well as the Mid-Hudson Valley, New York, where I'm based at the moment. The presentation is based off of the Galili and Rosen 2011 reading that we were assigned for our seminar readings called Submerged Neolithic Settlements off the Carmel Coast, Israel, Cultural and Environmental Insights. And now I'll just quickly turn to my land acknowledgements. I've included the Flinders land acknowledgement, stating that Flinders is on Ghana land, and I've also included an excerpt from my undergraduate institution, Bard College's land acknowledgement. I'm still in the area of where I went to college, and I'd like to acknowledge that this area is originally Munsee and Mehicanok indigenous land, and that the Munsee and Mehicanok people were forcibly removed from the area by white settlers and now reside in northeast Wisconsin at the Stockbridge Munsee community. So to begin, just an overview of the sites. The Carmel Coast, Israel is a 15-kilometer by 200-meter stretch of sites. There are 5 pottery Neolithic sites and 1 pre-pottery Neolithic site. And these settlements were submerged after post-glacial sea level rise and were uncovered incidentally through sand quarrying processes that were going on along the coast, as well as maritime and coastal engineering. And here we can see a map showing where the sites are located along the coast. And actually, Galili in 2018, as of 2018, had identified a couple more submerged sites along the coast, bringing the total to 11. But less research has been done on them, or at least has been published on them to this date. So I'll be focusing on a few of the sites that were more thoroughly documented in the 2011 reading. So to begin, I'll start with the one pre-pottery Neolithic site, Atlit Yam, which was active from 7200 to 6500 calculated BC. And Atlit Yam is 40,000 meters squared, and it was submerged in 8 to 12 meters of water. Atlit Yam, which is mapped here, this is a map of all the features of the site, and we can see that it's pretty expansive. The site included rectangular stone structures, round stone installations, which were presumed to be sort of storage pits, sandstone megaliths, anthropomorphic stelae, and of note, particularly stone wells, hearths, and charcoal, which could be radiocarbon dated to a pretty high degree of confidence, stone tools, 65 human burials, as well as faunal and organic remains, which could also be radiocarbon dated and sort of gave an idea of the farming and hunting and economy systems that were in place at the site. So here we can see on the left here one of the wells that was excavated at Atlit Yam, which I'll talk more about in the next slide, as well as one of the burials. This is actually a mother and infant, and I will talk more about them later as well. And unfortunately, I do have to glaze over some of the really interesting work that has gone on at the site. Here we can see some of the sandstone megaliths, and this is an artist's depiction of how they probably would have been used as a site of worship. And here we can see some of the anthropomorphic stelae. And stelae, I didn't really know much about before this reading. They are commemorative stones that are sometimes indicative of mourning or reverence or dedication to the dead. So at Atlit Yam, there were 2 wells excavated, well number 11 and well number 66. And well number 11 was 5.5 meters deep and 5.5 meters below the seafloor, which was about 15 meters below the present sea level. And well number 11 was excavated through several strata of clay, sandstone, broken limestone and rock, a couple larger cobblestones, and deposited floral, faunal, and cultural fill. Well number 66 was only partially excavated, but the top section was filled with animal bones, flint, worked flint, and bone tools. So, what does the fill of these wells tell us? Were they refuse pits or were they contaminated? Essentially, the question that Galilei and Rosen wanted to answer was why was there this floral and faunal material and cultural material in wells that were ostensibly used for drinking and fetching water? And what they determined is that the dates of the fill um, could mark sort of when sea level rise and groundwater seepage started affecting the site and affecting the site's freshwater access. Because they determined and sort of analyzed that there was no way that the people at Atlit Yam would have contaminated their wells while they were still a viable freshwater source, and only would have started discarding the refuse in the wells after groundwater ocean water sort of seeped into the groundwater and made the wells no longer viable. Additionally, the charcoal that was found in the wells gave a radiocarbon date, marking them as a pretty early development in the settlement. And the wells also are a good indicator of pre-pottery Neolithic sea level, given that wells sort of wells in order to produce water have to reach the water table. So the depth of the submerged well indicates that the pre-pottery Neolithic sea level was between 15 and 16 meters below the present sea level. To the human remains and skeletal material recovered at Atlit Yam, the mother and infant pair that I showed in an image a few slides ago actually revealed evidence of the earliest known cases of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in humans. Prior to this, Mycobacterium had come from cattle with the Mycobacterium bovis strand, and instead of Mycobacterium bovis, the tuberculosis cases at Atlit Yam suggest that the disease developed as a result of dense human population. Additionally, the burials were dispersed throughout the village site and were importantly, they were sort of interspersed with sites of living and habitation. There was no separation of the living and dead at Atlit Yam. So now I will turn to the pottery Neolithic sites. All of the pottery Neolithic sites, Kafar Samir, Kafar Galim, Tel Khrez, Megadim, and Neveyam, were found at depths of 1 to 5 meters, and they all included stone and wood structures, stone, wood, bone, and pottery artifacts, stone extramural graves, and charred organic material and bone. Kafar Samir and Kafar Galim, both of those sites showed paved floors, stone storage pits, filled with woven and wooden bowls, as well as evidence of olive oil extraction, which is important for the development of the modern Mediterranean diet that we still see today. And they also included wood and limestone wells. So some of these pottery Neolithic wells, again, they were made of wood and limestone and contained faunal, organic, and cultural remains. The floral organic remains included domestic grains, legumes, and the faunal remains included cattle, sheep, and goat bones. And importantly, we saw what they saw was evidence of olive pits and olive grinding tools dating to around the 5th millennium calculated BC, which translates to like 6,500 to 5,630 years before present. And this shows evidence of the processing of olives into olive oil, which became a major staple of the Mediterranean economy, and that influence is still heavily felt today. The depth of the wells reveals the pottery Neolithic water table and where people could access fresh water, and suggests that the pottery Neolithic sea level was only 10 meters below the present sea level, as opposed to the 15 to 16 meters during the pre-pottery Neolithic era. Turning to Kafar Samir in more detail, the 1,200-meter strip consisted of wells, stone basins, stone paving and dugouts, tools, wood and woven materials. And here we can see archaeologists excavating one of these stone pits. And you can see they're using a wet dredge. And Kafar Samir in particular produced major evidence of olive oil production, which again is integral for the development of the Mediterranean diet and economy. Turning to Nevayam and the Pottery Neolithic burials, here we can see a site and feature map of Nevayam, and everything that is a diamond is a human burial. And these burials are attributed to the Wadi Rabba culture, who were primarily an agrarian farming and herding people who fished and hunted less than previous societies. However, they did still fish and hunt. And the burials at Neve Yam are about 1,200 years younger than those at Atlit Yam. But during that 1,200-year time period, an important development occurred, which was the separation of the living and the dead. The burials at Neve Yam tend to be more concentrated in a roughly 700-meter square cemetery with stone graves and ossuaries. These graves are extramural stone-built burials, and they show signs of visitation and ritual, evidenced by charred seeds and woods at the sites. So again, the important separation of the living and the dead occurred in that 1,200-year period between the pre-pottery Neolithic and pottery Neolithic. Here we can see a more closely drawn site map. A right here, this block A is one of the graveyard that was noted, and we can see a clear separation from the dwelling areas. So finally, turning to the methodology of the archaeology and some conclusions on the work conducted there. Galili and his team used a pretty unique methodological approach, considering the distinct challenge that Neve Yam continually presented over the seasons of work. The sites are located at a challenging depth, where scuba diving is a little bit difficult because they're not that deep, but also there's very active wave and storm interference at the sites, and so they resolved to, quote, let the sea do the job, which meant that they would let storms roll through and assess the seabed after each storm and see what kicked up, and from there they would use wet and dry pumping and dredging of the sediment, and would go about their meticulous archaeology at that point. So importantly, both the pre-pottery Neolithic and pottery Neolithic sites showed a development progression of a more sedentary and agrarian and herding Neolithic culture, which is a development from a more hunter-gatherer society into a more sedentary society. And the villages are importantly, they were evidenced to have been abandoned as a result of gradual sea level rise, which is determined by bathymetric reconstruction with data from the wells and the groundwater slope. So the archaeologists and geoscientists were able to model the bathymetry and site geomorphology to understand how exactly it was impacted by sea level rise. And this gradual transgression of seawater counters former hypotheses that a single catastrophic tsunami decimated the site. Additionally, a lack of tectonic evidence appeared that further corroborated with this idea of a more gradual transgression. And importantly as well, a separation of the living and the dead developed in the 1,200 years between Atlit Yam and Neve Yam, which potentially indicates a social change in values. So here are my references, mostly Galili papers and a few others. And here, as promised, is my contact information for questions, comments, and concerns, and just to get in touch before I join everybody in Adelaide for Hiro Yoshida's intensive as well as the field school. Thank you.